Hey guys, how's it going? Firebox here. I have some unfortunate news. SDF has confirmed that solos and duos will be removed officially when Adventure Rank ends for the season. So, what does that mean for this game and for this channel? Well, we're going to go ahead and get into that. With the removal of solos and duos in HR, this is going to mean that this game will no longer be playable for anybody who wants to play solo or duo, unless you play in trios or you play in PvE mode where you can't be attacked by other players. Uh, Quite frankly, this game at this point is not in the same state that it was way back in the playtest when everybody was new to the game and you didn't have to worry about, trio stacks of very geared marketplace players steamrolling down really anybody, including solos. So it just doesn't really have that same vibe that it used to, where you can just kind of play solo and maybe get some kills of trios. I personally won't really be participating in that. So if you like that kind of gameplay, it'll be there and you can try, but I personally won't be joining that. So with that said, solo and duo HR will be gone, and we will be left with only trios for this game. And that is going to be that. That has been confirmed from SDF himself. I'm going to show the direct messages from him here in a little bit as well, just so you know I'm not lying. I promise. This is 100% confirmed from him. So what does that mean for my channel? Well, that means that I am going to 100% not be supporting Dark and Darker anymore once solos and duos gets removed. If they decide to revert or not do this change, then I will still be here, of course, because I still like Dark and Darker. But I am a solo player or maybe a duo player. I'm not a trio player. I will personally be moving on to other games. Luckily for me, there are a lot of other games coming out this year. That includes Mistfall Hunter, Midnight Walkers. Legacy is a little bit better than it was last season, and I think if the devs keep working on it, we're going to have a solid space. We have Shadows of Chroma Tower for PvE, Expedition of the Darkness for PvE, and we have even more games that I just listed, all supposedly coming out this year. So I'm not too worried about it as far as my channel is concerned. I've already started the process, a year ago or whenever I started to introducing new games to you guys on my channel because I had a feeling that SDF's madness in terms of updating and how he does changes on this game, I knew something was going to go wrong at some point, and we've already been heading down that path, spiraling down out of control for a while now, and at this point, we have probably hit the path of no return, which is very unfortunate because I really do enjoy making solo build guides, then sharing them with you, and seeing how much I can push the limit of different classes, different gear sets, and I don't know, it's just very fun. My entire channel is based on solos, so with this being removed from the game, I will of course be moving to games that are actually going to support their player base and not just make random decisions that have really no merit. So all those people that have bought Dark and Darker and supported them since the lawsuit had first started, that bought the game under the guise of solos existing, are basically shit out of luck. We are pretty much out of money for all of those players. And I know I'm not alone in saying that because there are a lot of my own viewers that I know of that will not be playing this game as solo gets removed. I'm a little bit lost for words. I really don't know what to say. When solos and duos got removed from normals, but it's still in high roller, I got a decent bit of comments going, "Oh, well, it's just a skill issue. Oh, sorry you suck at the game. You can't play high roller with the big boys. Should have known it was gonna come. Whatever. Stupid shit like that. It's always some comment that I get under my channels. Well, the problem was I didn't say it on video, but at least I don't think I did. I really did think about, well, shoot, what happens if Iron Mace is, like, this is like a stepping stone, you know, because it's mid-season, we have rankings. Like, okay, well, what happens if SDF just decides, oh, well, actually, this is only the midpoint, and we're gonna do the rest of the removal towards the end of the season. And I thought that that might happen, but there was no proof, no basis, so I wasn't gonna just start a baseless claim. You know, I guess I could have mentioned it, but regardless, what I was worried about originally has officially happened. So that's really it's really unfortunate. I don't really know what to say. Let me go ahead and show you the proof that I have real quick. Alright, so there's a new channel called SDF's Kitchen where SDF makes comments. SDF is the Iron Mace lead developer at the moment who makes what seems like 100% of the decisions on this game. So if he is saying this, it means that it is basically guaranteed to happen. The only way it will not happen is if he changes his mind. Right now, this is confirmed, and it is probably going to go through. We recently reduced normal mode to trios only. At that time, we chose to set the item limit to rare, even though we were aware that doing so might not be ideal, given the current level of gear disparity, but that is what we wanted to test. The reason was to test whether randomly matched teams could still play well under such conditions. Previously, the matchmaking pool was too fragmented, especially at higher gear levels, making it difficult to even conduct proper testing, as random matchmaking often failed to find a party or required too much time. Although the new normal rare pool mechanically succeeded in forming parties, it did not perform well as we wanted due to the large gear gap and the diverse objectives of party members. Additionally, the lack of in-game communication tools further contributed to these issues. As a result, we plan to change the item restriction in normal mode to common rarity and maintain that setting throughout this season. The more limited power range for starting items should better align party expectations until we can directly address the power gap issue. High roller mode is currently divided into solos, duos, and trios, a structure designed to accommodate players participating in the adventure rank. Once the adventure rank ends, these queues will be merged into a single trio pool. Confirmed right here. I'm not lying to you. I wish I was. At that point, we will offer a wide variety of communication tools, whatever this means, to better support cooperative play. I do not care what Iron Mace does or what they think will work for this game. In a full loot PvPvE game, I am not interested personally in playing in a group of three. I think the gameplay for trios in this game is not fun. I think the gameplay in duos is fun, and I think the gameplay in solos is fun, but they're removing both of the modes that I enjoy, and I do not have never liked trios. So that pretty much means that once this change is implemented for end of adventure rank, it is going to be the end for me. I will never play this game again. I will probably uninstall it once this change goes into effect, unless they change their mind. And I will completely move on to other games for my channel, and we'll just kind of go from there. So let me just go over, I guess, the rest of SDF's Kitchen, since we're here anyway. And I'm sure some of you may have never even seen this, because Iron Mace didn't make it very obvious that this existed. Oh, you can see based on the number of emojis that not a lot of people have even seen this. So this might be brand new information. I'm planning to use this space to casually share thoughts from time to time. I've tried a different approach before, but you're thinking of running a cooking channel, that's most fitting. If it doesn't turn out to be effective, I'll try something else. But the time being, I just want a light, comfortable space to throw ideas and spark conversation. I've tried to explain many things along the way, but I feel like it hasn't gone as well as I hoped. There are probably many reasons for that, but I think the situation has become more complicated as we become contradictory choices are added features and later removed. That would be the classic flip-flopping that seems to happen every other patch. That made it even more clear that we needed to communicate but we didn't do that well enough. I'm sorry. I'll just start talking without much structure. Some of it might sound a bit strange or scattered, so bear with me. Where should I begin? Let's start with random modifiers. There are quite a few things tangled up in this topic, so it might be tricky to explain, but I think this is a good place to start. If we look back at meeting notes from September 1st, 2022, when we first decided to test random modifiers, I wrote something along the lines of, I think simple items like Ultima Online suit this game better, but have more depth, build variety. We'll need Diablo-style affixes. Let's implement it quickly and test it out. So we could have developed the system without randomness, but designing each item individually would take a lot of time. In the beginning, we chose a method where items are determined randomly because it was simple and fast to develop. Yeah, I think a lot of the decisions in this game, quite honestly, have been how quick and easy is it for us to develop it and put it out there based on a lot of patches that we've gotten throughout the years. But this has brought a huge amount of randomness into the game, meaning that obtaining what players wanted required a tremendous amount of time. Also, since we didn't yet fully understand gear gap, the game ended up having serious gear disparity. However, we are still in a short play testing phase at the time. These issues didn't become apparent yet. The number of random modifiers that can appear went up to 11 pieces of gear at once grow exponentially, making balance hard, especially since we designed the system to allow for sharply focused builds like Enslave the Spire to enhance fun. That part was achievable. However, maintaining even a minimum level of balance was pure hell. So we tried reducing the number of random modifiers that can appear on gear. We also created our own scaling system with attribute bonus to limit the effects of items. However, all these knobs we created only pushed into a trap of complexity. And during the process of adjusting items, we received a lot of feedback from players who have already become familiar with the system and enjoyed acquiring powerful items, saying that the changes were moving in a negative direction. We also had significant negative feedback from players who had already obtained many good items. The biggest issue was that we made those changes in the middle of the season. Although we anticipated this negative reaction, our wipe schedule was too far to keep up the pacing of testing. We created a test server, but it wasn't efficiently utilized due to small number of users. The difficulty of serious testing and internal issues. The update process was inconvenient. The migration of new versions had to be done manually. Because of these, it kept getting deprioritized in development. Okay, let's just be clear here. The test server did not just not get used because of a small number of users. The game had a small number of users because it wasn't getting updated at all, which players also paid for, by the way. Iron Mace got an extra 10 or 20 bucks per copy of the higher edition that people paid for to have this. Plenty of other companies have test servers. So let's be completely honest here. The test servers failed because Iron Mace failed, not because the player base didn't exist. I recognize the other stuff they said here, but this is 100% an Iron Mace issue, not a player issue. You know, we bought the game for test server and they just did not use it. But now the test server is definitely easier to update and maintain, and going forward, we plan to make full use of it. Well, that's good, finally, that they're going to do that. Early players were used to checking information through Discord, the only way to check for information, and of course, streamer streams, if you're a big streamer. And during the early access phase, patch notes and other updates were available via Blacksmith Launcher. Because of this, creating an in-game feature to check patch notes and other information was deprioritized. Apologize for the feature still missing in the game. We will prioritize developing it soon so players can access information without relying on Discord or other tools. Once the news feature is updated, we will also share test server updates and testing intentions. If something is updated on the test server, please participate actively and leave your feedback. I will also consider whether there's a way to allow other users on all platforms to access the test server, since access to the server has been an exclusive feature for Hold the Line. Yep, early on we bought that. Been hesitant to fully open it so far. However, for the sake of better improvements, we think we can make this change without upsetting Hold the Line owners. Let's get back to talking about random modifiers. This feature brought several benefits to game, but it also came with some side effects. One of the positives was diverse builds without having to manually create everything. That's true. This game does have a pretty wide array of build options. It's part of why I played the game for so long. However, it's also highly luck-based, which can easily become a difficult and time-consuming. Yep, it is a little bit time-consuming for sure. Building kits, especially before the gem socketing came out. Because the gear gap is so large, people started complaining. We only have gray items, but get crushed by players who have purple in every slot. At the same time, since we had only trio queues and no support, we also receive if you don't have friends, you can't play the game. Yeah, that's kind of what's going to happen. Now, if we revert that, we introduced solo queue and created goblin caves, and ever since people also want to duo, we added duos. First, I didn't like this approach, we wanted to satisfy players. So whenever I got the chance, I kept insisting everything that we should remove solo and duo queues. You know what's really funny to me is Iron Mace was willing to release solos and duos to make money to help them fund their lawsuit against Nexon. And all that money from players that bought the game because they play the game solo or duo are basically just getting completely screwed over. Every single one of those players who bought the game solo or duo did not buy the game for trio, which is really one of the most messed up things that I've seen a company do. Like basically just removing their game after they take your money, which is kind of insane to me. And then we took a closer look at Gear Gap. At first, we thought it would be migrated if everyone had powerful items, so we tested things like adjusted drop rates, having merchants sell rare epic items directly, or allowing players to buy items with their revealed stats. Sometimes these worked as intended, other times unexpected side effects occurred. But even so, players still often fell victim to the large gear gap. The measures we took weren't enough to keep up with the ridiculously low chances for obtaining best in slot items. They ultimately required a lot of time. And unlike typical FPS games, our game required many players to learn new skills or more in combat, so time was needed to improve. In the end, those who could invest a lot of time tended to have both strong gear and higher skill from other players. We represent players who can invest a lot of time in the game versus those who cannot as a pyramid. The group that can invest a lot of time would be likely similar. Anyway, we saw that players couldn't invest a lot of time, were repeatedly failing to get results, and quit the game. We began thinking about how we can keep these players engaged. Players who are already doing well wanted more content and better balance, but we couldn't invest much in that area. Since we believe the game systems weren't yet complete, we started developing various systems to better support the player base, especially after the introduction of the adventure rank. We implemented systems like SBMM, skill-based matchmaking, which used adventure rank to separate matchmaking pools. Gear-based matchmaking, using gear scores, and eventually realizing the dynamic systems require too much pooling, so we did bracket systems instead based on rarity. We knew from the beginning that having solos, duo, trios, multiple dungeons, etc. would fragment the player base. However, our priority was to see if players could have meaningful progression experience moving through brackets, even if it was split at first as we went ahead with these attempts. Well, again, they will never say it, but let's be clear. They added solos and duos because they wanted to make more money for their game. There's no way they would have released solos and duos if they thought that it wasn't going to draw a decent amount of players from that. Otherwise, they would have just kept the game, trios only for good, right? I mean, I think that's pretty obvious from a business perspective. Of course, you would want to do something that would help open up your game to as many players as possible, which is what they did. But the loot system, what we call the loot drop system, was in infancy. We couldn't properly tailor the items for each bracket or pool because the time it took to earn competitive items was still so great. Many players concentrated in 0 to 24. Yep, these are the Squire lobbies people play. We also introduced continuous matchmaking to alleviate the empty dungeons. Yeah, this is joining dungeons late. Before the introduction of the, continuous matchmaking system, we returned to Steam and wanting more players to create the game, we switched to semi-free-to-play model. And yeah, they messed up because they didn't really claim it as a demo. They said it free-to-play, which resulted in a lot of bad reviews. The biggest issue was that normal dungeon had a restriction allowing only common items. The players who obtained higher rarity had no place to use them. To those players, the game felt like a demo, and it gave impression that we had hidden the real game behind a paywall in a sneaking attempt to make money. Yeah, that's what players were thinking, or that's what the reviews were saying. I don't think that was ever Iron Mace's intentions, but I 100% see why people thought this. It made sense from an outside perspective. As a result, we heard a lot of resentment from players. That was never our intention. We simply didn't have the breathing room to reflect the side effects of the complex system we built. In any case, the negative feedback happens. In response, we had a bracket system based on gear, allowing Squire status to use epic and legendaries. Ultimately, the biggest issue was the gear gap and excessive amount of time required to catch up with it. There was no perfect solution without directly addressing this core problem. We were able to achieve some level of control by introducing multiple brackets, but the system felt artificial. For example, the 25 to 124 bracket ended up being the least played due to the poor loot system. It wasn't meaningfully different from the 0 to 24 bracket. There were times I wanted to remove the random modifications altogether, but the game had already come too far for that to be an easy choice. We also tried to drastically reduce item gear gap with patch 69, probably one of the worst patches in the game that I've seen, next to multi-classing. But since it having mid-season, items with dev rolls didn't maintain the gap associated with rarity. It resulted in overwhelming feedback. Okay, let's just be clear. The negative feedback was not just because it was mid-season with dead rolls. 69 was where you could just have like gray gear, where the gray gear would have higher damage rolls than uniques. It was really silly. This entire patch didn't really make sense to me personally. 69 1 was slightly better, but then most players had lost interest, and I wasn't able to explain the intention. This is where SDF's disconnect, I think, really comes in. SDF, I truly believe, thinks that patch 69 was like this genius book that he did for a patch, and that the players just don't understand his genius vision. This is not what that was. You know, most players were, I mean, I get that there's some of you that like 69, but the majority of players did not. So I'm speaking on the majority of players. 69 got reverted because we had things like a unique, I don't even know, like a unique stiletto having, let's just call it like 25 damage, 28 damage, whatever the hell it is. And then the Squire gear would also be like 29 or 30. So the unique had lower rolls than the uniques did. And this was across the board. So you basically just played Barbarian with Squire gear, and you could kill every player in the entire game, no matter what their gear was. I just stopped wearing gear entirely and just played it like a pseudo battle royale. It was very silly. It's funny just seeing SDF feel disconnected to the reasons that players dislike this patch, and he chalks it up to, well, it was mid-season, so people lost their roles, so I guess that's why people didn't like it. I don't know, just kind of, I don't know, that just really shows SDF's mindset, I guess. Even I felt personally unjust. Even I felt unsatisfied when acquiring items, so everything was reverted in order. Well, I guess at least he figured out that it was unsatisfying, but I still stand by what I said with this specifically. I don't think it had anything to do with the dead rolls or the game changing mid season. I think even if it was start of season, it would have went just as bad. Just saying. Had I thought things through more carefully, taking the time, players wouldn't have had to go through such frustrating. It's entirely his fault. Well, at least he acknowledges this patch's woes, so that's at least a +1 for him. Currently, if we were to remove random modifiers, I believe there still needs to be a slight difference based on rarity, and that rarity should function as true rarity. Legendary items shouldn't feel legendary because of their power, because of how rare they are. So I guess the gear drops are going to be significantly reduced again. So everyone who liked that recent patch where items are easy to find are just going to be SOL, I guess, again. It sounds like that's going to change. Of course, it does not mean the absolute removal of random modifiers. They still have their advantages, and we have slowly reduced a significant number of time consumption through the socket system. I've also recently come to the realization the other issues by a large number of systems and modes we've added. Perhaps I had already sensed it earlier, but I might have turned a blind eye. I've come to understand that with our current team size, it's impossible to perfectly balance all these modes or maintain so many interdependent systems without bugs. It only increases the team's burden because I've always pushed for fast development, but we made a lot of trade-offs in the code and didn't give ourselves time to properly reorganize the complex systems we built. As a result, they started to interact in unpredictable ways, creating massive bugs. There have been bugs in recovery systems, Dungeon Master, Expressman, the CMM. There's synergy, or rather negative synergy between rarity and gear score, and the Squire's quick repair. The Druid, designed to handle everything decently, became OP in solo environment because of the gear score system. That doesn't carry a weapon, it can wear relatively powerful gear, become an all-around powerhouse, but even so, it still struggles to perform in trio. There are just a few examples off the top of my head. They're countless I could list. Because I was too long trapped in the desire to solve these fundamental issues, our team members have been doing their best to the point they can't work any harder, but overall, our team has slowed down. At the same time, to address feedback from hardcore players who wanted items to be a bit stronger to actually acquire them, who dislike pro play during the course of other players while watching the fight go on, being distracted. We strengthened items and brought back circle and random portals, which likely caused confusion among players of other tiers. This game has a wide variety of player types, and their voices often conflict with each other. Because of that, we had to listen to player feedback with extreme caution, and that remains a very difficult task even now. We also wanted to create an environment where casual players could stay enjoy the game, while at the same time hoping that hardcore players who had invested hundreds, thousands of hours would continue to have fun. So we tried to support both sides, and in the end, due to our ambition, it felt like we weren't able to satisfy either. Even within our own team, there are many people with completely different play styles. For example, I'm a hardcore PvP player and mainly playing trios, never playing solo. If SDF was a solo player only, this entire game would be different, by the way. Just saying. In contrast, Terry, although that wasn't the case in the past, also really come out to prefer more relaxed PvP since he may have to quit the game at any time. He avoids team play to prevent inconveniencing other players and prefers to play solo. Of course, this isn't the only way we play the game. Please don't misunderstand or overinterpret these examples. Even though he says not to misunderstand or overinterpret these examples, I think it's pretty clear to me that SDF does not like solos or duos. I really do think the only reason that it ever got released into the game is because SDF was dealing with the lawsuit and needed a way to make as much money as possible. And what better way to make money from, players that play solo and duo down the road than to release solo and duo modes of players that might never otherwise buy the game to begin with. I really think that's what it comes down to, regardless of what is written here. Still, what we have in common is that we don't have much time to play games, but despite that, we genuinely enjoy our game and try to invest as much time into it as possible. Despite having different personalities and playstyles, we respect each other deeply while passionately trying to persuade one another, and since we're both quite persuasive, we sometimes end up implementing features in the game that we don't personally prefer. For example, when Terry was trying to find ways to keep new players in game, I advised him the biggest source of stress for early players might be sudden PvP. We could even consider removing them entirely in extreme cases. When the PvE adventure mode was being developed, I personally did not want to include it because I was aware of the various side effects it could bring. However, I agree that it could be a good way to onboard new players to provide the simplest way to the play button, so it was added. Terry wanted to keep Fog of War. We clashed several times over this, but he eventually agreed with my points that for players who play repeatedly, brute forcing their way through the map increased fatigue, that it gave cheaters a big advantage, and that new players often couldn't find extraction points, making the game harder and lowering player retention, so it was removed. Anyway, to sum up, the large item gap and significant time investment caused by random modifiers, combined with our intention to support various player groups, led to the creating many pools across regions with different dungeons, modes, styles, etc. This resulted in difficulties managing the game and caused players to be too scattered depending on the region, among other side effects. Moreover, the numerous experiments and attempts to solve these problems increased the development team workload and made it seem like we're stuck in place. Back in October 2024, I declared that I could pursue the original vision and want to get closer to the game we set out to create. However, due to my limitations, I wasn't able to get as close as I hoped. There are many ideal aspects of which for the game, but at least regarding dungeons and combat, I hope that inside dungeons, players and parties of various sizes with different objectives can coexist more naturally. Also, I want the Gears Impact win or loss to not be too overwhelming, so that players without best items can still have a hope. Up until now, we tried to solve that issue by separating it into various modes, but that phase of experimentation is over. I will reduce all modes, party types, brackets to only those with clear intent, and I want to properly refine and polish these minimized targets. Terry, the design team, and I will study ways to support player groups that were previously supported by various brackets and modes so that they can perform well in the minimized bracket and mode. For example, in the early days of CMM, exits open too quickly, allowing players to escape too easily, which caused other issues. However, it also provided means for weaker players to farm and leave safely. While it's not entirely clear yet, I believe the various insights we gained through these experimental tests will be helpful moving forward. Additionally, I am determined to streamline the item system to be fun while limiting side effects mentioned earlier. Among the many knobs we have, I want to at least fix the item aspect for class balance and class development. Our team is already fully committed to developing new systems and content, such as OSUM themed dungeon named the Blue Maelstrom and Gathering Hall. Until now, I hadn't thought about explaining things in such detail, which caused misunderstanding speculation. From now on, I'll do my best to explain everything on this channel. As I say, I'm an ordinary person who loves the game. Sometimes my thoughts or directions might be wrong. Because I don't think I can promise everything will go perfectly. You've been disappointed too many times to believe anyway. I can promise that no matter the situation, I will always do my best. Next time I'll talk to you about something I'll be curious about. And if it feels like I didn't explain topics well today, I'll make sure to clear things up. I think that's going to be everything that I wanted to share for this video. To be honest, I'm kind of checked out as far as Dark and Darker is concerned at this point. Knowing now that at some point in the future, near future, this game will be unplayable for me, I've kind of stopped caring about all the other balance decisions and really everything else. But I know that Iron Mace does not do very well at sharing their information with their player base. So I figured I would just share that Discord channel and show you all the messages that you might have never seen otherwise. That's going to be all for the video. I will be around still to play other games. I mentioned them earlier, but yeah, there's a lot of games coming out this year, extraction-wise, that we'll be able to play. Another one I forgot to mention is Hunger. That game also looks pretty sick. So I'm not too worried about it. There will be games for me to play for sure on my channel. Even if we never play Dark and Darker again, it's fine. We will move on and push through. So thank you all for watching and supporting my Dark and Darker content over the last few years. It sounds like it might be coming to an end officially here. So see you guys. Catch you guys next time.